During the presidential election, you write a Deutsche Bank employee raised concerns about transactions related to Jared Kushner, and that there seemed to be, at least sort of sociologically, you're able to report there seemed to be a link between Kushner's dealings with Deutsche Bank and Trump's dealings. They they involve the same banker. They seem to sort of be cultivating the same ties. What do you know about the seriousness of the concerns that were raised about Kushner and sending money to Russia during the campaign?
I mean, they were extremely serious. This is the woman who raised these concerns, named Tammy McFadden. I spent a lot of time talking with her. And she was so concerned that she not only filed a suspicious activity report that was supposed to be sent to the government, but when that report was killed, she started complaining so loudly internally that she had to be transferred to another part of the bank and then ultimately was fired. And she still feels really strongly about this. And she had the courage to speak up publicly and talk to me, have her picture taken, which is something that in this day and age, in this political climate, just takes such guts. And people who don't feel really strongly and really alarmed about what they've seen don't do it.
Were you able to find any independent corroborating evidence that those payments might have been a thank you or a pass-through to Russia, basically to compensate them for the help they were offering Trump in the campaign?
I'm afraid not. And that was definitely something that I was looking for, and I was not able to confirm that. What I was certainly able to confirm that a number of other people within the bank had raised similar concerns, whether it was about Trump or the Kushner accounts. And there's a long-standing pattern within Deutsche Bank of facilitating money laundering for people in Russia and elsewhere. And the anti-money laundering compliance officers at Deutsche Bank certainly were viewing these Trump and Kushner transactions through that lens. It fit the bill of the exact type of stuff they had been trained to look out for. And, you know, they tried to raise these red flags and were thwarted at every turn. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't think they had any insight into what the intent of those payments were. They could just see the payments leaving the bank's accounts and going into the pockets of these Russians.
And knew they were suspicious enough and of a type of suspicious payment that they should have been reported to the financial.
Yeah, it wasn't a close call, they said.
I have more to ask you. We'll be right back with David Enrich. His book comes out tomorrow. It's called Dark Towers, Deutsche Bank, Donald Trump, and an Epic Trail of Discussion. We'll be right back.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.